Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Director Clark, Director Stark,
Here.
Director Weber.
Here.
Thank you.
Right here. All right. With that, we'll go to our public opportunity to discuss matters of the public interest within the committee's scope, including items on or not on the agenda.
I have no speaker cards. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to make a public comment? No public comments this evening. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move along. We'll move to consent items. Any questions, motions, seconds, or call? What's your pleasure?
Questions? I'll make the motion.
We got a motion and second.
Okay, Weber, Clark. All right, Director Weber, Director Stark,
Aye.
Director Clark. Thank you. Motion passes. Consent calendar is adopted.
All right, now we go into presentation items. The first item of the agenda this evening will be fiscal year 2025-26 Capital Improvement Program Plan amended by Aaron Castleberry.
Thank
You
you.
have the stage.
Sorry, this is very tall for me. All right. Yeah, it goes up and down. Good evening. Sure. Tonight, I am here to provide an overview of our amended capital improvement plan for fiscal year 25-26 through fiscal year 29-30. As you know, back in June, the board adopted the capital improvement plan. And during the final budget process, we have the opportunity to review the approved CIP and make any necessary adjustments. So that is what we have prepared. You should have gotten that attachment. So amendments made to the CIP can be a number of different things. They generally fall into two categories, either project revisions or cost revisions. So project revisions would include any projects that we were intending to carry over into the new fiscal year that we actually did get completed, so they can come out of the CIP. Any projects that we thought we were going to finish and we didn't actually finish, so they would be rolled over into the new CIP. Any added projects, and then any scope changes to projects, whether that's number of items, whether it's, just any type of scope change to a project. Those all get reflected in the amended CIP. So all of the division managers had the opportunity to review their projects, all of the funded projects, and submit any updates that they had. Cost revisions, on the other hand, those by their name, basically only deal with cost changes. So anything that's a multi-year project, we will update the amounts to reflect actual year-end expenditures of the prior fiscal year. So think of construction projects, things like that. At the time that we prepare the preliminary CIP, we still have about a month and a half left of the fiscal year. So we do go back and make any necessary changes to reflect where we actually ended at the end of the year. Any confirmed cost updates. So when the budget goes into effect on July 1st, we, move forward with getting projects going. And if there's any pricing changes due to like an actual quote or an actual contracted cost, we try to make those updates in the amended CIP so that we're reflecting the most accurate cost information we have. Same with revised estimates. If we have any reason to believe that the estimated project costs have changed for whatever reason, we make those changes. And then same with any deferred costs. If we have decided that most of the time this has to deal with vehicles. So if there's a vehicle and based on the delivery timeline, if we're going to defer purchasing, for example, the comms equipment, we'll push off the cost of the comms equipment to a future fiscal year. So those are the types of revisions you'll see in the CIP, the amended CIP. So as a result of our review, we've got a comparison here. The blue section is what was adopted as of July 1st. And the red section is what the amended proposed is. So we adopted a total of 46 projects approved. In the amended version, it is recommended 55 projects. So we added 2 apparatus and equipment projects. We added 7 facility improvement projects, and those were the only changes as far as number of projects. Cost revisions. So the total cost of all of the approved projects in the adopted CIP was 179.1 million over the total 5-year plan period. And the amended cost is 174.9 million. So our costs actually went down, and we're going to talk about the reasons for that on a future slide. But you can see here some savings in apparatus and equipment. We had an increase in facility improvement, which correlates with the added projects. PPE stayed the same. New construction came down a little bit. And then land acquisition, no change. As far as the actual budget appropriation for this current fiscal year, 25-26, what was adopted in the CIP was a total CIP budget of 109 million across a variety of fund sources, which we'll go over later in the presentation as well. The amended is 103.2 million. So again, less of a cost in fiscal year 25-26. Same categories, apparatus and equipment went down, facility improvements up, PPE the same, new construction down, land acquisition, no change. So this is sort of a summary of the overall changes. I tried to put this in categories as best I could here for you all. So we had nearly $2.8 million in reductions to reflect year-end actuals. So that means we actually spent more last year on the projects than we estimated we were going to. So that means we don't have to spend that money in this year because we already spent it last year. So that's the net change there. We also have reductions in revised cost or cost estimates. So a reduction of 4.5 million in what we anticipate we're going to be spending. I'll talk about some reasons for that here in a moment. We have about 700,000 in deferred costs. We had increases of 913,000 because of increased cost estimates or actual costs. We had just under 700,000 of additional costs for carryover projects that were not completed last year that we're bringing forward into this year. And then 628,000 in new projects that were added. So the total net change is a $5.8 million reduction off of the fiscal year 25-26 budget. So some of these changes, year-end actuals, those were primarily construction projects. So like I said, when we estimate how much we're going to have spent, over the next month and a half when we prepare the preliminary, we actually ended up spending more than that. So we won't be spending that this year. On the revised cost and cost estimate, I think it's important to note here, the majority of that 4.5 million is savings in apparatus. If you recall, when we did this presentation to you all in June, we told you we were front loading 3 years worth of apparatus so that we could bulk order. That has resulted in significant cost savings for us, and that's reflected here. So I wanted to especially point that out because that's a direct result of that bulk ordering. The deferred costs, all of those, with the exception of I think 90,000 of that is all deferred comms based on current updated anticipated delivery timelines for vehicles. So we did a conservative estimate in the preliminary CIP on what we thought it might be. So that adjustment reflects just some deferred costs. So we will have those costs, just not this fiscal year. And then increases in revised costs and cost estimates, just as people started to work on their projects and they actually got actual vendor quotes, timing wise, there were some increases there or scope changes. And then added carryover projects. Those are primarily offset by unspent funds from the last fiscal year because those carryover projects were already budgeted last fiscal year. They just were not completed. So most of that 687 is actually offset by unspent funds. And then we had 628,000 in new projects. Some of that is a result of, if you recall, we had some projects that we were not sure if they would be Measure O eligible. And so we did work with our bond auditor to go through that list. So we did add some projects and those are reflected here, as well as some emergency projects that we had at the end of last fiscal year that were not necessarily planned projects, as this CIP is typically used for planned projects. So we have reflected those in the CIP since they do meet our dollar threshold and are considered capital projects. So that is the summary of the changes. So there wasn't much change in how this is split across the funds. You can see in the amended version, the amount coming out of the O fund is slightly less. Again, that's primarily due to the savings in the apparatus. The I fund expenditures are a little more, and that is because we had a larger available I fund balance for our vineyard project, Station 67, which is actually split between two fund sources, between the O fund and the I fund. So we actually moved some of those costs out of O and into I since it is an I fund eligible project. The S fund, the difference in the special projects fund, which is for Zinfandel, is purely as a result of actual costs at the end of the fiscal year. So we had more spent last year, like I said, so we're using less of those funds this year. A fund is slightly increased. That was due to some of the added projects. And then the D fund is the same. We now also are using a little bit of L fund money for a project here at HQ. So that was a carryover project, a new carryover project. So you'll see there, but for the most part, not a whole lot of change between the fund sources. That's all I have for you tonight. I'll take any questions you have.
Questions from the board members?
Could you elaborate a little bit on the why the construction costs went down? That's
Yeah. They didn't actually go down. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm just going to make up a number. If the total project is $10 million
Okay.
and we thought we were going to spend 7 million last year and 3 million this year, and we actually spent 8 million last year, then we're only going to be spending the 2 million this year. So the total cost didn't go down, just how it's split between the fiscal years changed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I was like, that's
Yeah.
not how it works usually.
No. We advanced construction at Zinfandel further than we thought last year. So we actually got further into that project.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, thanks for a great report, but I want to make sure that we thank Shay for the strong work and saving us a lot of money, the citizens of our district. We really appreciate your efforts and the efforts of all the staff on this. It's a really great report. Thank you.
Great.
All right, moving on. We will go to the next presentation, which is the fiscal year 25-26 final budget from CFO David O'Toole. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, Fire Chief House colleagues, members of the public. When this slide comes up, I'll be starting on the 25-26 final budget. There it is. Okay. Yeah, tonight we'll be presenting the 25-26. The reference point for this budget will largely be 24-25, although in a couple of exceptions, I'll be showing you preliminary budget too, which we, of course, you adopted just a few months ago. Let's take a look at the agenda. Typical for these budget presentations. So we'll do a final budget overview, looking at all funds and including the general fund. And then we'll drill down into general fund revenues, general fund expenditures, capital outlay, and I'll include a long-term forecast as well, with a couple of scenarios to look at as well. And then I'll just sum it up with any questions. Okay, so this first slide is, it's a little dense here. There's three things going on here. It has the gray box across the top, that is all funds. The blue area is general fund. You can see the columns there where we have the prior year 24-25. And then, like I said, I'm showing you a preliminary budget look as well, and then final. So the final column, of course, is what we are proposing for this fiscal year. Let's see, in the gray area for all funds, final budget revenues from all funds are 358.9 million, expenditures 457.3 million in the final column there. And with some transfers in of 168 million, that's mostly Measure O. We sold those bonds on July 2nd. The change in fund balance across all funds is to increase it by 70 million. So that's what you'd see across all funds. Looking over at and down into the blue section below, all the way to the right, final budget revenues, well, actually final budget revenues climbed from about 329 in the prior year, 329 million, over to 341 million at final. Expenditures climbed from 323 million all the way to 341.5 at final. The next row, other financing sources, which is mainly the net transfer in and out of the general fund. Reduced balances by 4.1 million. That's mainly transfers out to capital facilities, typically for things like apparatus financing as we continue to pay those off. What all that means is that revenues are less than expenditures and transfers out of the general fund by 4.7 million. So you see that change in fund balance under the final column, 4.7 million. It's actually, and then it's bolded under the projected general fund transfer, because that's what it is. That's to balance all that out, we need to dip into the reserve 4.7 million. If you look just to the left of there, the 4.3 million, that's what I presented to you in prelim. So it actually increased a little bit. Now let's look at the bottom two rows where I'm showing you, again, prior year, prelim, and final. The reserve amount was 34.7 is what we think at the end of the year it looked like. What I presented to you in prelim was 33.2. So that's what I was saying. In June 30th of 2026, that's what I think it's going to look like. At the time, of course, I told you this is preliminary. We're going to have end of year numbers come in. We're going to get new property taxes. We're going to get a whole slew of information. And I'll give you a new number at final. And I said, it's probably going to improve. And that's what I'm telling you. Improve by about 36 million. There's about 3 million up to 36 million. And our reserve bumped up from 9.8%. Remember, that's the number I presented at prelim. Now it's 10.5. So that's what happened there. We are not alone, dipping into the general fund reserve. Unfortunately, we have company in this regard. As I mentioned, I think last time I presented, Oakland has an $89 million shortfall, San Francisco, 274, City of Sacramento just closed a $66 million shortfall. And it's a couple more years of dipping into reserves to come. Sacramento County's reserves is down to 1.8%. So it's going on in this area. We're not alone. The next slide. So this is all funds. So this is just a snapshot of all 8 funds that we operate in the district here. The general fund is off on the right. There are some familiar numbers there. The estimated ending fund balance at the end of on July 1, the end of June 3rd, at end of last fiscal year 24-25 was 40.7 million. There's those revenue and expenditure numbers and transfers I just told you about that gets you to the 36. So that's how you read that column. Over in the capital facilities fund, we don't have any balance in that fund. We spend what's there. We'll have a little bit of a balance at the end of the year. We project 667,000. Lease properties fund, have a little bit of revenue coming in from those properties. We expect to finish the year at 2.8. Grants fund, we expect to receive a little over 4 million, spend it all, end with a balance of 0. Development impact fees fund, we just heard a little bit about that. We anticipate that there will be expenditures of about 14.2, and then the balance will be just under 3 million. The next 2 funds are Measure O. They're the new funds. The first one, the Measure O Debt Service Fund, is for what the name says, for debt service. So we put some money in there from the bond issuance, and we're going to pay off debt service in that fund. And then the building fund, of course, is the money we expect to spend this year. And then the Special Projects Fund, the S Fund, the Zinfandel project, it may have a small balance there by the end of the year, 150,000. So that's the big picture of all funds. And now I'm going to take us back into the general fund. So the next few slides are some high level numbers or what's happening on the general fund side to get you familiar with that. Let's see, again, the projected general fund revenue, 340.9 million, which is 12 million, 3.6% increase from the prior year budget. Property taxes are 224.9 million and 11.8 million increase over last year's budget. And that's actually a 2.8 million increase over prelim. It's another one of those factors that happened between prelim and final that bumped up our balances there. We get an update from our property tax manager in July, and that we incorporated into final, same as every year. Charges for services are estimated to be 108.5 million, which is a $3.6 million increase over last year and 1 million over prelim. Medic fees, we're at 50.2 million, 3.2 million over last year. PPGMT, the Public Provider Ground Emergency Medical Transport Program, 25.5 million, which is 1.3 million increase over last year. The Voluntary Rate Range Program, 16.5 million, 300,000 increase over last year. And then CRD fees increased by 260,000. Let's see. Sorry, I was already on the next slide, but helps to look up. The bottom, I think I just read you the most of that slide there, but the bottom there, the net of the formerly IGT categories revenues. So that's your IGT and VRP. This is a popular, that's a significant part of our revenues outside of EMS and outside of property tax. We expect to get 26.6 million this year, which is a little bit less than last year by 600,000. So that's the general fund revenue picture as anticipated. Why is that?
What's the cause of the 600?
Sure, the revenues are about the same, but actually the amount is a good question. The amount that we have to contribute to DHCS to pull down that, they increase the amount on us. There we go, expenditures. All right, so as previewed, expenditures are 341.5 million, it's $17.8 million over last year. The labor budget's at 273.5 million, up about 2.4%. The budget adds 10 positions. Those positions, again, are 6 firefighters effective May 1, 2026, a shop assistant, a helicopter mechanic, warehouse supervisor, and a facilities tech. The total cost of those positions in 25-26 is 940,000. It'll be about $1.2 million higher when we have the full year cost of those 6 firefighters. Labor costs as a share of general fund revenues will be 80%. And 25-26, it's a decline of about 1% since last year. And I think when I presented that prelim, it might have been 81.5 or so. So it slipped down a little bit, which isn't like to share that. Service and supplies, 63 million. So that's 10.8 million over last year after incorporating the former IGT expenses. What that is referring to is Voluntary Rate Range Program and PPGMT. Those used to be in a separate fund. We moved them into service. We now reflect them in service and supplies cost for the general fund. Okay, so looking at expenditures, the labor subset, 152.6 million for compensation. Wages are $5.4 million higher. Constant staffing, $6.5 million lower due to a full pool staffing. So that is a change to how we account things. We account for costing. We're now reflecting the full cost of positions in the pool as well as the full staffing of the department.
But then that guarantees we're not browning out stations, or at least decreases our use of browning out stations.
To the
correct?
extent we have that full pool, yes.
That's correct. So it's costing us some money, but I would say it's money well spent.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then,
stations open.
and then there's a relationship with the constant staffing too, where that goes down.
Oh, these are forecasts as far as having a full pool. We don't have a full pool right now.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Just want to make sure.
Is what we think will happen over the course of the year. Yep.
We're working towards that, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Incentive pays went up by 1.5 million or 8.1% higher. That's what happens when you increase wages. Corresponding incentives go up. The employee behavioral wellness incentive is still in there, 3.3 million. It's the total benefits is also up 5.2 million, 4.5% greater than 24-25. We are incorporating the CalPERS pension contributions for safety and miscellaneous that added 7.1 million or 11.6% over last year. Employee medical costs went up 2.7 million. There's a small increase in the workers' compensation costs, about 252,000 relative to last year. A quick snapshot of the service and supplies. I mentioned that it's 63 million total in the budget. Just some of the more notable items, if you will. I mentioned that IGT payments to the state of California for PPG and GMT went up. That's about 700,000 there. More education and training. The district's liability and property tax insurance premiums increased by about 700,000. Increased vehicle maintenance services, 568, computer services and licensing, 526,000, and 645,000 for dispatch services costs, mainly related to a recently negotiated contract. Moving to capital outlay, I just have the one slide here. We just heard quite a bit about the CIP. The total spending is 103.2 million for all capital outlay. That includes CIP and the smaller items that don't fit within the CIP. And 75.6 million committed from the Measure O Building Fund. Some of the major projects, which you've heard about, just mentioned a few: Station 67 build out, 25 ambulance replacements, 2 ladder truck replacements, 15 Type 1 engines, et cetera, et cetera. There's also some notable capital outlay from the other funds: Development Impact Fees Fund for Grant Line 220 acquisition, 2.4 million, and Zinfandel Phase 3, 13 million.
Just to be clear for my education, the 2 ladder truck replacements we're talking about are tiller ladder trucks. They're not the rescue rig and the hazmat. Is that correct?
They are aerial, but they're rear mounts. They're not.
Okay, that's fine. But they're separate. I'm just trying to make sure that I get them straight. Yes, thank you.
Is that the shorthand? All right. So next, we're going to look at the forecast, the long-term forecast, 5 years. But I want to put out some presumptions or some assumptions. Obviously, this is subject to a lot of different factors, but do the best with the information we have to give you a projection right now. So it does incorporate the latest county reports, which we received in early July for the last fiscal year, as well as our independent property tax consultant, what they did. And they did with that information and then gave us a forecast out for the next 5 years. It includes current wage and benefit costs, includes natural growth, what we call just step increases, sort of like people in place growing and earning more in step increases of about 2% annually beginning in 26-27. It's sort of an austerity budget, if you will. There's no wage or staffing increases assumed in this forecast. It has a current PPG and VRP with about a 2% annual increase. Pension costs are increased at CalPERS projections. So I just took their projections and dropped them into our model. And then annual CPI increase about 3.2% through the forecast, which is about what we're seeing federally and what we're able to get from those sources. Before I share that forecast, I just thought this was an interesting slide too. You know, I guess there's an assumption by some, or if you're looking for a home, there's an assumption that the home prices keep going up. And this is within the district. This is only district data here. Let's see, detached single-family residential full value sales from January 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. So about 30 months is that snapshot you're seeing there. The median home price shown with the blue line is 516,000 all the way to the right. Back in January 22 is 520. So the median has actually come down slightly. The average home price, the red line, went from 55,000 in January 22 to 581. So that actually did go up relative to then. But this is sort of a signal for the property tax forecast. And what we're seeing is that the growth is not taking off as well as it once was. And so our forecast is showing less growth than we thought in preliminary. And let me just take you right to that. Okay, so this is a 5-year forecast for general fund reserves and general fund reserves. As you can see, the amount of general fund reserves, the blue column is fairly flat across the 5 years, a little bit up and down, but fairly flat. At the same time, district expenditures are growing at a faster rate. And so the reserve ratio, the green line, is gradually declining. That's where you're just seeing it kind of stepping down every year. Reserves start at 10.5%, and then they end up at 9.1% 4 years later. The red line, sort of a marker, is where 15% would be. So you can kind of see where we are relative to that target. Some things to keep in mind, the 5-year forecast shows general fund reserve borrowing continuing, albeit at a lower level than this year. The forecast includes borrowing next year of 900,000 in 26, 27, 55,000 in 27, 28, so just right on the board there, and 2.2 million in 28, 29 before, and then in 29, 30, there would not be any general fund borrowing. That's sort of a point in time forecast right now. And the next two slides, as if the news had not gotten bright enough, these are scenario slides. I did them last year. I wanted to bring them back, just kind of like things could go south. Yeah, they're kind of dark for a reason. The next two slides are kind of like what could go wrong. So this is property tax growth. This is 2% property tax growth. Incidentally, the slide I just showed you, it's a little under 4% those years, 3.8%, 3.9. And so this is like, what if it got to half that? What if it would cut down to 2% growth? Well, in 5 years, you can see the reserves would be eroding. We'd be at 6.9 million or negative 1.8% in 29-30, with no other actions taken, just holding everything status quo, which of course we wouldn't, but just that's a snapshot. Looking at,
I have a question.
sure,
So,
yeah.
so when you're looking at these numbers about the cost of the medium home price and the average home price, that doesn't take into account the new home construction that's going out in the south end of our county, right? Our
Yeah, that
district.
will only show up once that property has been sold, and yeah.
So that's in no way reflected in this information.
Any sort of new development that's on the map, or that's not in this forecast.
Although when I was looking at it, was the strategic plan, there's anticipated to be as many as 150,000 new people in Rancho and in Vineyard. That's not reflected in this.
Exactly. If there's,
Thank you.
this is 5% compensation growth, just chose that number, look back 10 years, all right, what's the average compensation of that line? How much has that grown over the last 10 years? It's been about 5%. So this is like, all right, well, if that continued, holding everything else equal, what would happen? And that's the snapshot there. So let's see, the blue bars, ending general fund reserve would shrink from 36 million to negative 13.7 million. Reserves down to negative 3.4% in 29-30. So again, this is a scenario. It's not what's expected. The board would act long before any of this occurred, but just it's a snapshot to see what would happen, because these are sort of the big factors that sit out there. What happens with property tax growth, and then how does compensation change? So that takes us to the budget summary. So real quick, again, a district general fund budget requires a reserve transfer, reducing the balance by 4.7 million to 36, and with a reserve of 36 million. The general fund reserve declined from 11.3% in 24-25 down to a projected 10.5% in final. General fund revenue is budgeted to grow 3.6% higher than last year, while expenditures will grow 6.3%. The 5-year reserve the 5-year forecast shows modest reserve borrowing will continue intermittently, subject to significant changes in property tax trends and labor costs, among others. And Measure O will provide substantial relief to capital project backlog with 75.6 million committed in 25-26. Those are my kind of summary points. With that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dave. So I've got a couple questions. First, how many years before we are finished paying off those engines? Because
Yeah.
you said in previous that, we saved $1 million this year.
Right.
So how long before those are complete?
So we have four years, 25, 26, 26.
4 more
yeah.
years,
Mhm.
and we're done with all of the payments on them.
Yeah.
Okay. And secondly, you've shown that ugly slide before.
Yes.
I would ask you to take that thing out of there. It's negative. It's just forecasting a bad picture for us. You just said yourself that we would not sit idly by. Take that out of there, please. That's ugly.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? You have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, I think that is pessimistic, and I also believe that there's going to be, as we said, additional growth that's not being reflected in the communities. I mean, it looks like they're building as far as the eye can see out south, and I'm hoping that we will be able to, provide a high level of service to those folks, and they'll provide additional revenues for the district. Thank you.
Two. Yep. All right.
You're up again, aren't
I
you?
think I need to go quickly into this one. I'm being ushered along here. Okay, so this is the last 24-25, the full year picture of the prior fiscal year. So we present this so you can monitor the fiscal health of the district and identify deviations from the budget plan. In this case, it would have been the mid-year budget was your last 24-25 budget. So this one is your cash balance trends as of June 30th, 2025. We've finished it at 86.5 million, about 5 million above June of 2024. And the general fund total revenues, let's see. We again finished better than last year, but also slightly better than budget. So the blue line is mid-year budget estimate, when shown helps us to see how we finished relative to the budget plan. So the blue line is the budget. You can also see how total projected budget revenues in the mid-year was 317.1 million. General fund shown at the top far right. As indicated by the arrows, actual revenues through June were nearly 318.7 million, about 24 million more than prior year, 23-24, and 1.5 million over what we estimated for the year. So we finished the year revenue-wise at this point in time, $1.5 million higher than what was in the budget. Looking at a subset of that, revenues went in the other direction, but obviously there were other factors at play here. So medic revenues finished below the blue line and just below prior year revenues for EMS. The green line actuals were 47 million, approximately 600,000 less than last year and 1.6 million less than budget. Let's see. So with EMS revenues finishing below budget, total revenues finishing above budget, revenues like PPGMT or property tax that offset it and ended up with our revenues, general fund revenues being 1.8 million above in total. The next two slides are PPGMT. This slide is 22-23, the first 6 months of the program, and then all of 23-24. Quickly, the amount still due over this 18-month period is down to just 2.4 million. The total collections over the period has been 28.7 million. So that's so including what's to collect, we now anticipate receiving about 31.1 million for the first 18 months of PPGMT. So we've gotten that number down significantly. This next slide is 24-25, the full 12 months there. And the gray column shows that monthly revenues are expected at about 1.85 million, 1.9. You actually might notice in July, we actually ticked over that. We're a little bit above that. So these numbers will continue to change as those past payments come in, but we're getting close to sort of saturated, if you will, on the amounts owed for prior months. Let's see, as noted on the slide, collections for the year were 18.1 million and amount outstanding 4.2. And that's PPGMT. Moving on to total expenditures. As you can see on the slide, actual 24-25 costs, the red line, and budgeted costs, the blue line, were very close together. At the end of June, actual labor costs, sorry, I jumped to the wrong slide. Actual expenditure costs were, here it is. Actual general fund expenditures are 319 million below the budgeted amount by 1.8 million. So just under expenditures by 1.8. Next slide is labor costs. Again, very close together. The actuals were under budget by about 120,000. So very close budgeting there with the labor costs. Next slide is general fund reserve balances. We finished the year almost exactly where we finished last year, off by about 380,000, right around 43 million. The purple dotted line shows where a 15% reserve would be, about 43.5 million. So we're close at that particular point in time. Similar to the cash balance slide we saw earlier, there's two dips and surges where money gets pulled out and we get transfers from the county, and that happens twice while we receive mostly property tax tranche payments. This next slide has a new element to it. The top is familiar. That's the CERP fund. That's the California Employers Retirement Benefit Trust Fund. And below it is the CEPT fund, the California Employers Public Pension Trust Fund. So looking at the top section there, You may notice that the SERP fund is, up and to the right. We have the total as of June 30th of 2025 of 101, almost 102 million. And the district contributed 64.3 million of that total since SERP began in 2013. So the table at the bottom is the new part. That's the SEPT. So in the mid-year budget, the board adopted a $1 million allocation to this new fund. We deposit 680,000 already. That's the performance. The remaining balance is going to be deposited before the next report. Will show up in the next report. You can see it's earned $40,000 or 5.7% since it was invested. And the fraud risk assessment. So real quickly, we have the fraud risk assessment. We present a quarterly update on it. Our update is really at the bottom there. We're recommending to withdraw due to some legal obstacles, some legal opinions, that we withdraw the recommendation to replace pay cards replace payroll checks with pay cards and continue to allow people to choose either way. So that's the only change since we last reported. Here is the report takeaways for the report through June 30th. General fund revenue finished 1.5 million above budget. PPGMT across 30 months, there's $6.6 million due, of which 4.2 million due from 24-25. General fund expenditures finished $1.8 million lower than mid-year budget. And labor costs finished 120,000, so another close finish with that one. And then we had strong SERP trust fund growth. There's a promising, if you will, first report from SEPT. So those are the takeaways for the bi-monthly fiscal report through June 30th. And kind of hurried along here, but in the interest of time, but any questions?
Thank you. That was very rapid. And questions from the board? With that, we thank you for your report.
Thank you.
With that, we'll be adjourning. The next meeting is September 25th.
Now we are adjourned.